Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Bless us with thy presence and thy guidance. Help us open ourselves to receive thy light and to share it with everyone. Om. Peace. Amen.
God is our Father, our Mother too. God is our dearest treasure. God's ever near, the one friend who loves us without any measure. Of his dreams our love was made, only from him his love repaid. Let us in gladness all live for him, serve him in every season, serve him with thought, with hand and limb, love him without any reason. God befriends us as we are, fools we that hold his love afar. God is our Father, our Mother too. God is our dearest treasure. God's ever near, the one friend who loves us without any measure. Of his dreams our love was made, only from him his love repaid. Let us in gladness all live for him, serve him in every season, serve him with thought, with hand and limb, love him without any reason. God befriends us as we are, fools we that hold his love afar. God befriends us as we are, fools we that hold his love afar.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Please join us in singing Cloisters, if you know it. I think most of you do. Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion, offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come?
Why don't we all stand for the last blowing of the conch?
Yeah, this is, as we've said, the invitation for the powers of uplifted consciousness, especially to awaken in our chakras and help carry us forward. Pandavas were mainly people in our line. You can be seated. Mainly people in our line. Krishna, Arjuna was master, and several of the others also were in our line.
How feels everyone? Awake and ready. How is everyone? Awake and ready. Now we can begin.
See how quickly rituals turn into habits? And anyway, good habits. Good habits take us most of the way. So we'll give a little overview of the 3 or 4 pillars of our path. I'll start with a little story that happened with Swamiji several years ago in India. Some of you have heard this, others not. So we were sitting with him during an interview. There was a woman from an Indian newspaper doing an interview for Swami, Indian spiritual magazine actually, doing an interview. And she asked him, do we really need a guru? And we assumed that he would answer in a certain way. He said, no, you don't need a guru. Why would you want somebody telling you what to do? And, you know, you have to follow somebody's advice and follow him. He said, you don't need a guru. Unless you want to find God, then you need a guru. So the pillars of the path, do you need sadhana? No, you don't need sadhana. Unless you want to find God, then you need sadhana. Do you need attunement? No, you don't need attunement. Attunement to the guru. Unless you want to find God, then you need attunement. There is a question later on. We're going to mainly answer questions. But there's a question which I'll answer here because it's so pertinent here. Do we need a guru or shouldn't we just follow God? Doesn't the guru get in the way? Well, Master said about scriptures, the problem with scriptures is that you can argue with them and they won't argue back. So the problem with just following God is, what is God except your God, except an extension of your own imagination? And that extension doesn't argue back very convincingly or guide you very convincingly. And Master said that furthermore, the law is that we must achieve our freedom through the agency of a guru. Anyway, so that's attunement. Now service, everybody has to do service of some sort. I'm going to read this quote. We get a little calendar, daily calendar from quotes of the autobiography. And this is from yesterday. This is from, it's a little, okay, I can read it. From transient teachers of my earlier life, I had imbibed a few erroneous lessons. A chela, I was told, need not concern himself strenuously over worldly duties. When I had neglected or carelessly performed my tasks, I was not chastised. Human nature finds such instruction very easy of assimilation. Under Master's unsparing rod, however, I soon recovered from the agreeable delusions of irresponsibility. Quote from Sri Yukteswar. Those who are too good for this world are adorning some other, Sri Yukteswar remarked. So long as you breathe the free air of earth, you are under obligation to render grateful service. He alone who has fully mastered the breathless state is freed from cosmic imperatives. I will not fail to let you know when you have attained the final perfection. So, do you need to do service? No, unless you haven't achieved the breathless state.
And then a question came in, what was the 4th pillar we mentioned? And that was sort of the fruit of the other 3, to see God in everything all the time. And so that's kind of less an activity than a state of mind. But really, on that state of mind, everything else rests. So those are the 4 pillars, and that's an overview. And we have many questions, both from that you've written in, from students online, viewers online, and also we want to give you those sitting here today the chance to ask live questions. But before we start, we mentioned that we have a little treat for you. So we're going to, many of you know Casey Hughes. He runs the Ananda Meditation Group in Encinitas. He has a beautiful center there. And earlier this year, he and his partner were in Varanasi, Benares, and he's a very deep disciple of Master. And they were sitting meditating, he was sitting meditating on the banks of the Ganges, and this pujari, a Brahmin priest who does pujas in a certain spot, and came up to him, to Casey, and said, "You need to build a temple to your guru." And apparently the tradition there isn't any ownership of the property right along the Ganges in Varanasi, but different Brahminical families have kind of had rights to them for centuries and generations. And they would do their pujas there every day. But this pujari came up to Casey and said, "You should build a temple. And here's a place that no one's using." It was a very small place, really.
2 card tables.
Yeah. But they're all, none of them are big. They're all about that size. And so Casey felt that was God speaking to him, his guru speaking to him. And so he began putting plans in action, and money totally unexpectedly came into his life, and he was able to contact engineers and architects and on. And then kind of a higher pujari came up to him and he said, "We see you are serious. Here is an abandoned temple, slightly larger, that is falling into disrepair. It's filled with mud and silt from the rising of the Ganges. If you choose, we will give this to you to reclaim." And so Casey has been working on this, and we're going to show you slides, 2 slides. This is what it looks like now, this white part of it. And it's going to be dedicated to, because this is right, it's on Manikarnika Ghat. And it's right, very close to where our Lahiri Mahashaya was cremated, very close to where Mataji emerged from under the slab and spoke with Babaji. So it's a very sacred spot.
And very, very close to what is probably the most iconic building of all along the Ganges, which is a tall, very ancient temple, tall in gray stone, slightly leaning. So if you get a postcard from Varanasi, it's probably that. That's about maybe 100 feet to the right of this.
So this
spot.
is what it looks like now. And this is the plans. He's already had a beautiful, large statue of Master made by the artisans in Jaipur. And there's a room farther back that seats between 80 and 100. And so this is the Ananda temple. And they hope to dedicate it. This is just a computer graphic, but they hope to dedicate it and have a ceremony there March 7th for Master's Mahasamadhi.
Yes, and I will Casey gives a URL, which we'll put on the Ananda.org website. So if you want to participate in watching the dedication of this on March 7th, just go to ananda.org and you can see the...
That's what we just said, March 7th, they're going to try.
At least for probably the first stage, it's an ongoing project. Anyway, that's very exciting news.
And it was just a gift from,
Yeah, there's magic happening in India around Babaji and Master and our line. Just things are coming to us completely unbidden and opportunities. So I think they really, really want this message for Dwapara Yuga to get out into not only India, but from there and from America especially, out to the whole world.
And I didn't want to forget, we'll go on now we'll start with written questions and then go on to live questions. But for those of you who are taking Kriya this evening, we wanted to show this especially to draw on the blessings of Babaji and our line of masters and really feel them present. And for those who are taking it for the first time, may this be a very significant spiritual turning point in your life.
Yeah, there will undoubtedly be Kriya initiations and daily practice of Kriya going on.
Okay, now the work begins. Okay, so I guess we don't need this.
Okay, question number 1. What is the purpose of evil? What is God's relationship to Satan? Well, evil is to keep us on our toes. No, that's a shallow answer. Everything in manifestation is based on the law of duality. So, as Master explained it, if you have a movie theater and the movie is showing, if it's all white, there's no movie. If it's all black, there's no movie. It takes black and white, or different tones, in order to produce an image. And so it is with the law of duality. Everything is based, even down to the atom, is based on the law of duality. The law of duality expresses itself in many, many ways. One is with light and dark. And so what evil is not, it's a concept we have to wrap our minds around. Evil doesn't exist as a solid thing. Evil is the polarity that moves away from the light into the darkness. And so the more one is attuned to contractive, darkening, descending, selfish energies as a human being, the more one is attuned to that polarity, the more one does the 3 pillars and other practices where you're consciously trying to move your consciousness to the light, then you're attracted and you live more in that vibration. Everything is made out of God. So Satan exists as a part of God. Satan exists, Master said, as the conscious force that tries to pull us into that darkness. And I'll end with this little story. We were last year in India with our friend Indu Ban. His mother is Rani Ban, who you read about in Swami's New Path. And she was the one who helped him meet Nehru and helped him toward the project of having a temple in Delhi. She's a very, very, very high soul. She's passed away now, but Indu often has dreams of her, often hears her voice, sometimes sees her. So he's in communication. And she said that she's very often in communication with Babaji. And she herself asked the question, probably on behalf of all of us, why do you allow so much darkness in the world? Can't you just stop it? And he said, everything is based on duality. The darkness has to exist. I can't just stop that. My job is to increase the light. And we, by extensions, trying for attunement, our job is to increase the light both within ourselves and in the world.
Okay, I'm going to, since I answered that one,
Okay.
go to that one. So this question is, how does one transcend deep-rooted triggers that create walls between oneself and others. In my case, I feel this may be misphonia, which is it's hatred of sounds, like someone chewing gum, breathing loudly. People are often triggered, especially by people close to them. I find that I am so thrown off my center that it affects my relationships with people I love. I am most triggered when I am stressed and struggling to stay centered, and less so otherwise. My technique of seeing each soul as a child of God and loving them with compassion is thwarted by the intensity of the reaction. Please help. That's a nice question. Sincere. I think we all have this problem to greater or lesser degrees. But in many ways, you answered your own question when you said the more I am centered, the less it affects you. I had an interesting experience recently. One of my little triggers is when I go into a movie theater and I'm waiting for the movie to start, and people are talking around me. I don't know why. It's their space as well as mine, but it just, maybe because I'm used to sitting in a dark room meditating. Why are people talking in my meditation room? But in any case, recently, a few months ago, we went to see a movie, and there were these two women sitting behind us, and the one was just talking and talking and talking, and it was bugging me a lot. But then something shifted, and I began to enjoy it, because I realized there was two women. One was maybe our age and a little younger, and one was her elderly mother. And she was explaining to her mother what the movie was going to be about, and I just started enjoying it. And I thought, wow, this would have really bothered me in the past. And it was like I sat there so joyfully, and I thought, signs of spiritual progress. But what was the difference? Well, a couple of things. One, over time, we do become more centered in ourselves, and the things that come at us from the world don't affect us so much. And I think when noises and people's repetitive patterns, it's because you're stressed, you're tired, but you're living on the periphery of your consciousness. So if you really can't control it, leave the room, if you can, just so you don't react. But try to at least, there's that old adage, which Swami said is based on spiritual truth, count to 10 before you say anything or before you react. So if it's bothering you, just use some period of time where you really try consciously to get centered. If it doesn't work, get up and leave. But what happened with me in that instance was I didn't feel that noise was outside of myself. I tuned in. This is about compassion. This is about love. That's what's going on behind me. Forget the words. And then I just relaxed with it. And I expanded, and it was part of myself. That's the thing. When you see the world as me and not me, everything's going to bother you. But when you see I'm a part of everything. I'm a part of that foolish person. I'm a part of that person chewing gum. All of that. And so the more you can relax in your center and then expand and feel a unity with everything around you, and don't try to control the reactive process. I think all of these things help. Okay, so you can go.
If, as you said, everything comes from God, how does free will work in the concept? Well, this is a very important question, and one that I think every devotee has. Master said that God, when we come into the form of a human being, that along with that come, a gift and a curse, but they're both gifts ultimately. One is that we have a nervous system that contains the chakras and is finally advanced enough so that nervous system can, in fact, allow the flow of energy through it that it takes in order to have union with God. He said in the mineral, plant, and animal kingdom, the nervous system or the consciousness isn't sufficiently evolved for enlightenment to take place. And so there the karma is more or less just a group karma. Once we're sufficiently evolved, then group karma begins to differentiate more. For instance, a tiger killing its prey has no bad karma from that. That's just the way that it is, and that's the way God set things up. But we shooting a deer would have bad karma for killing a deer, would have bad karma from that, because we have a greater degree of choice in how we behave, how we react, what we do, how we think. And so along with that advanced nervous system comes the gift or the curse of free will. So our job then is to attune that free will, because God is allowing us to make choices. Our job is to attune that free will with higher choices. And with God ultimately, but with God in the form of the Guru through attunement. But Master said that most people don't really have free will, even though they think they do. Their free will has been completely conditioned by things that they've done in the past, and they have not free will, but free whim. And so they just act on prior conditioning. And therefore we have to develop that attunement. Master said, I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. And he said, that's the way to pray and the way to act. So we do have a degree of free will, but we have to align it. And then there's another level, and I'm going to just touch on this. Who do you think you are? Who do you think expresses free will? Do you think you're the ego? Do you really want the ego to express free will? What if, because in Devi's dream with the little dog, that was a dream character that her consciousness had created. Do you really want that dream character to say, oh, what a beautiful dog, I'm going to keep that, and then when you wake up in the morning, there's a dog sitting on your bed? So do you want your ego to determine something that goes beyond the dream of duality, or even this level of duality? So be careful what you wish for. You don't want ignorance to guide something that goes beyond the realm of ignorance or the realm of Maya. So free will, yes, but try to align that free will with the wisdom of God.
This one has a relatively short answer. How to start the day with meditation and include God in every task. I start my day at 6 a.m. My husband sometimes starts at 1 a.m. Okay, well, what's behind that question? It's too hard. I can't do this. I don't have time in my day. Well, are you working 24 hours a day? If you get up at 1, do you work from 1 a.m. to the next 1 a.m.? If we need to look at those points in our life, if we work a night shift or whatever, look at those points in your life that you can meditate. And so it's just shifting the whole approach to sadhana to can't, don't have time, don't have a place, phones ring, to how do I do this? What's the art of the possible in my life? Every single one of us has challenges. Our dear friend Nayaswami Shivani, who lives in Assisi, she was in Rishikesh and she slipped and she broke a bone in her foot. So she's in a cast from the knee and in a wheelchair. And someone posted a picture of her energizing in her wheelchair, And you go, I can't energize. I've got a cast on my leg. What's the art of the possible? That's really what you need to look at every aspect of your life. Can you think of God at every minute? That's until that's where your soul is totally identified with God, then no, you can't. But maybe you set certain times. What's possible? When can I think of God? When will I think of God? You know, this year we all set or most of us set New Year's resolutions. And this year I did something different, and it's really working. I said, what do I do that's positive? Not what will I aspire to do. And I made a list of 6 things that I generally do every day that I want to do. And I said, okay, we're going to do these every day. And it's possible because I'm already sort of doing it. And I'm finding that I'm kind of adding things now. So it's better to start with what's possible, what's doable. If this person who wrote, if you have to get up at 6 o'clock, can you get up at 5:30 and meditate for 10 minutes? Is that possible? Or can you meditate when you get off of work? Is that possible? So it's just how you shift your perspective. Instead of, it's hard, I can't, because all that's doing is self-justification. How many reasons can you think of not to seek God? And how many reasons can you think of to seek God? There's really just one reason to seek God. And that's because that's all there is. But we can find a million reasons not to do it. But find the one thing you say yes to, and then build on that and build on that. That's what I did with my New Year's resolutions, and it's really working.
And the next question is like unto the last. What is the best thing to do when you're in the heat of battle, in meditation or activity, and you find the Kauravas, or the dark side, gaining ground, threatening to sink the ship? Well, quitting is not a good option. So how do you continue fighting that battle? There are lots of different means of fighting that battle. The problem is not how to fight the battle. The problem is the will to fight, to continue to fight. And so how do you increase that? Willpower, or will alone, is a very weak crutch. There are lots of studies showing that will is like a muscle that's not very strong muscle either, and that not only does it get fatigued, but it doesn't function very well even when it's not fatigued. For instance, fatigue. There are lots of studies showing that if you're going to have a court date, try to get it Monday morning, not Friday afternoon. Because by Friday afternoon, the judge, his will decision-making powers are all fatigued, and he's just going to go by the book. Monday morning, he might listen to reason. And so lots of things like that. So if will isn't the way to do it, then when your will is strong, you have to use that in order to get good habits and good strategies going. So it comes back to what Devi was saying, where you make a list of those things that you're doing and maybe add 1 or 2 things that you want to be doing. Then you have to build a habitual pattern around those things. Because if, for instance, you don't have the habit of morning meditation, after you get up, you don't have the habit of, I get up, I energize, I go to the meditation room. If that is a strongly developed habit, even when the Kauravas are really threatening, you're still able to follow that through. If you don't have that habit, and you get up, some mornings it's easy, other mornings the Kauravas are right there, a foot from your bed, waiting for you. And if you have to depend on your willpower to say, I'm going to energize this morning even though I absolutely don't want to, you're not going to do it. So develop habits, because they're going to be the most powerful things in your tool bag. Secondly, call on the power of God and gurus to help you, because That's the whole allegory of the Bhagavad Gita. Why did the Kauravas lose and the Pandavas win? Because Arjuna chose Krishna as his ally, where the head of the Kauravas, Duryodhana, chose all of Krishna's army, all of the tools, the elephants, the jewels, all of that. So choose to have your ally be God and Guru.
And I'll just add very briefly, the more you do practice meditation and attunement and seva, the more the predominant part of your consciousness identifies with the Pandavas, with the soul awakened qualities. And then when the Kauravas come, and of course they will, of all of the negative qualities, they're there, but they're once removed. Where can't you feel when you really get in trouble, it's when the Kauravas are really, they get in there amongst you, and you just, oh yeah, it's okay if I don't meditate today. Yeah, that's right, I've been working hard. And it becomes your predominant thought pattern. But the more you meditate, the more the Pandavas, without having to use willpower, just calmly say, get up, meditate. And so it becomes, it's what at first is a battle of will becomes more of a process of self-identification with the highest soul qualities within you. Okay.
Okay. Could you talk a little about the differences between calmness and peace as aspects of God? Fortunately, I don't need to because Master's going to talk about it for us. Where are we?
The orange.
There, okay. So I'm going to just read. This is Master talking about there are 8 aspects in which God can be experienced as light, sound, peace, calmness, love, joy, wisdom, and power. And I'm going to only read 2 of them, peace and calmness. If you want to know what the rest are, get this book, Essence of Self-Realization. So, peace is an early meditative experience. Peace, like a weightless waterfall, cleanses the mind of all anxiety and care, bestowing heavenly relief. So we can also think of peace as like the waves on an ocean becoming calm, so that there isn't a battle going on. The duality lessens, and you can rest at that time. Calmness is another divine experience. This aspect of God is more dynamic and more powerful than that of peace. Calmness gives the devotee power to overcome all the obstacles in his life. Even in human affairs, the person who can remain calm under all circumstances is invincible. So with calmness, those waves have not settled down. You still have to deal with the storms on the sea, but you have the power to continue to steer your ship because you're centered within and you know how to work with that.
Okay.
We'll take one more and then we'll have some opening for questions.
In a group meditation, is it okay to do Kriya loudly? Is it okay to ask someone else who is loud to be more quiet? Can I be rude? No. In our Kriya initiations, we teach the technique so that you do Kriya as loudly so that a person perhaps sitting next to you could hear you doing it. And in the beginning, it's good to do it loudly because those of you who don't have it Kriya, you'll understand, and I won't, because this is for a general audience, we won't say too much, but by doing it loudly in the beginning, it helps you to awaken a sense of the flow of energy and controlling that flow of energy in the spine. But it shouldn't be, I've heard people do it very, very loud. And that's too physical. That's counterproductive because it's a pranayama, but it's more than a pranayama. It's primarily working with subtle energy. And so if you're doing it too loud, you're doing it too physically, and you need to maybe have somebody check your kriyas. So is it proper to ask somebody to stop doing it so loudly? Just like the question about misophobia, I would get up and move if somebody is doing it really loudly. It's not nice to disturb people in the middle of their meditation. It's jarring to them. But in our own practice, don't do it. Do it loud enough so that you feel a flow of energy. The more, if people who've been practicing it for many years, often they don't make any sound at all because they're more working just with the inner flow of energy. So your goal should be to do it more quietly, but in the beginning it's better to do it loudly to get the flow, the sense of the flow of energy.
I'll just add, generally speaking, if you're in a group that meditates together often, it's only one or two people there. So you might, after a meditation, go to the person who's doing it really loudly and say, I don't know whether you're aware, but you're doing it so loudly that you're disturbing other people. In group meditations, you might want to do it a little more softly. Okay.
We'll take a few from the audience and then we'll maybe go back. So these are our two assistants, and the sound technician has requested that we get two lined up so that the person will be waiting for the next one. So are there any questions from the group? Okay, Ganesha, and then is there another question? And Michael can go to that person. Not yet, okay.
I think it was the first day you mentioned an article that you read, The End of the World, and I missed the name of the book.
It was in the Divine Romance by
you.
Master. Okay. So it's a very good article. All right.
Well, we'll just proceed on. We have plenty of ammunition, so. But if something occurs to you, then keep it in mind.
Should I do that one?
Sure.
Okay. So this is from someone online, and they ask, we've sort of answered this, but we'll go into a little more detail. I notice that people choose to have attunement with Guru rather than God. While I honor Yogananda and have read Autobiography of a Yogi and was very affected by it, I wonder why people are going to an intermediary rather than the source. This is one reason I like mystical religions. There are no intermediaries, just your direct connection with divine God Spirit. Is there anything wrong with attuning directly to God? I thought that was the purpose of meditation, to attain union with God. I am so confused. Well, we answered this a little, but it's an important question because who is the Guru? Yogananda said, I killed Yogananda long ago. No one dwells in this bodily temple now but God. So the true Guru, and this isn't somebody who just is a popular teacher or captured the global imagination or something like that, but the Satguru, the true Guru, is nothing more than God's individualized agent who will work directly with sincere souls. So that's the pivotal point. Yes, you can say, I want to go directly to God, but how do you get there on your own? It's impossible. They say that each soul is divinely ordained to have a specific guru who will be their instrument to bring them to freedom, to God, to self-realization. And so this is the way God created it. Like you could say, well, why do we need buds on the tree? Why can't we just have trees and then leaves? Well, it's a process. The buds come and then they grow and they open and they become leaves. And it's a process of soul unfoldment. And the agency behind that is the Guru who, remember, attunement, and the class on attunement, we talked about, Swami said, I can see how each of you individually will find God. Well, the Guru works individually with each one of us because we each have a unique path to God. And ultimately, no, we don't, there's the story of the devotee who for years and years would sit in front of the picture of his guru and offer flowers and be devotional. And that at a certain point, through the guru's grace, he experienced his oneness with God. And he said, I have been throwing these flowers on this image. I throw them on myself, who is also a receptacle for the fullness of God's presence. And so it's not to say we worship the ego, but the guru has to take us to the place where we can know God. And we can't know it on our own. We can have devotion for God. We can love God. But when you want to do the work to find God truly, you need a guru. Because he's the one that will give you not only the techniques, not only the teachings, but the inner grace to know how to do the techniques, how to understand the teachings. And ultimately, so many stories of the guru taking on the disciples' karma, taking on our karma, so that we can move towards freedom. So we need to understand that they talk about the trilogy Om Tat Sat, or in the the Hindu tradition. In the Christian tradition, it's God the Father beyond creation, that's Sat. God the Son, the Christ consciousness in creation, that's Tat. And then the vibration of God that permeates everything, and that's the Om. But the Son of God, the Christ consciousness, that's the guru is one with Christ consciousness. We're not talking about religion here. And it's in that Christ consciousness, which is sort of, one might say, in the battlefield. God beyond creation watches, but the guru is our chariot driver, isn't he? As Krishna was for Arjuna. He said, I'll steer you through this battle. That's my job. And so that's why we need the guru.
I'll just add a little bit that, there comes a point at which you've wandered through the desert from mirage to mirage for so long that you're tired of saying, I don't need any help. You're begging for help. And it's at that time that the guru will come, when you're open and when you really want the help of a guru. And so it's, as Devi said, it's a natural process that just occurs. And I'll add that once you have found a path, then stay with that path. Because each guru, if you think of an oasis in the middle of the desert, each guru might be placed at a different place around that oasis. And so those who are wandering from, let's say, the south toward the north, come upon the guru, and he says, the oasis is over there, about 82 degrees to the right. And so you go in that direction. If you get halfway there and you say, oh, I think I better find a different route, you have to go back and find some other advice. And he might say, oh no, that guru was wrong. The oasis now is to your left, 120 degrees. So you start there and then you come back because you don't find it yet. They're all pointing toward the same oasis. They're all trying to guide us into the infinity. But if you keep skipping from one set of practices to another, then you don't make very much progress. Moreover, when do you skip? It's when things begin to get to the edge of your own comfort zone. Then you say, oh, well, this is getting a little hard. I think I'll go back and find another way. And so if you keep backing off once you're at the edge of your comfort zone, then you're destined to wander in circles inside your comfort zone.
Okay, question from the audience? Okay, Sambhava, Catherine. Is there another question from the audience? Okay, so Michael, you can go over to Pam.
Oh, Pam, go ahead,
Pam, go.
because you've got the mic.
Earlier, in an answer to another question, you said not to control the reactive process I might have misheard. And years ago, our friend Maria Warner said, learn to control the reactive process. I wonder, what is the reactive process that we are and aren't supposed to control?
Okay, no, I'm sorry if I misled you. Definitely control the reactive process. So what is the reactive process? If I would walk up to you right now and give you a big hug, would you respond? How would there be a reaction within you? If I would walk up to you right now and say, hey, that's my scarf, you took that, and I grab it onto your neck, would you react? Well, that's the reactive process. It's just our response to outward events, activities, anything in the world around us. And why do we want to control it? Because it leads us into the fluctuations of positive and negative, into duality. The reactive process is based in duality. That's why there's the wonderful story of the sadhu walking through the village, and he was an anchorite and had long matted hair and covered with ashes, and the little boys in the village started kind of taunting him and teasing him, and he just controlled the reactive process. He just kept walking, and then one of them kind of pushed him, and he kept walking, and one of them picked up a stone and threw it, and he kept walking, and then they all began throwing stones at him, and one hit him in the head, and his head was bleeding, and his back was wounded. Finally, he left the village, and some of his followers said, Master, what happened to you? Who did this? He said, oh, we had such a good time in the village today. The boys were laughing and running and throwing stones. There was no point of personal self-reference to refer to. So the more I like this, I don't like this, it's always coming back to you, your ego, your point of personal self-reference. But if you just say, this is happening. She came up to me, I know this is my scarf, but she ripped it off my neck. If she needed it, she needed it. You know, that's controlling the reactive process.
I'll talk a little bit about the hows of it. So the reactive process is centered in the heart, and a negative reaction takes energy and it goes in a downward contractive direction. A positive reaction takes it in an upward expansive energy. The more we practice meditation, the more we practice Kriya Yoga, we tend to train that reactive process to move energy in a positive direction. So people who are Kriyabans are generally more positive, less reactive, less subject to the whims and wherefores of the world. And so anyway, the meditation sadhana helps us to train ourselves to move that energy in an upward direction. But that's generally training without outside stimuli poking at it. There's no trigger point. And so with the trigger point, then you have to also train yourself to do something to move that in an upward direction, even though you've been triggered. And there's a whole neurological aspect to this. There's a part of the brain that's triggered constantly. So if you go to open the door and you try to turn the knob, you expect the knob to turn and the door to open. If it doesn't, there's an aspect of the brain that the neurons fire. And then within 2 or 3 firings, you retrain yourself not to expect that doorknob to turn and the door to open. So there's a whole, God creates a whole dilemma for us. Coming back to how to work with this, Devi gave one solution, which is when you have been triggered, you're about to have a negative reaction, try to count to 10 before, because that trigger happens, the negative reaction happens, but it quickly dissipates and quickly comes down. So try to create a delay before you carry out an action, which is to do something. I shouldn't tell this, but I'm going to. You know,
It's not about me, is it?
no. You know, it's not about you at all. When someone does something that you don't like, try to take your fingers and push your mouth into a smile. Because it only takes 21 muscles to smile. But it only takes 6 muscles to reach out and slap them.
You know,
That's not spiritual advice.
we'll get to Sambhava's question. I just want to say one more thing. It's very common in our society today that people have problems with anger. They have a short fuse. Somebody says something to them, and boom, you know, that wasn't right, you know, and then you multiply that by many degrees, and you find the state of uncontrolled violence that you find in our country today, in the world. But as devotees, we have more tools to work with. So if you find you have a tendency with a short fuse that you react angrily, try as much as you can. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, don't guilt it, that won't help. But look at that part of the brain. Try to feel it. What gets activated when I get angry? What does that feel like? And on a certain level, it feels good because you're releasing. But ultimately, you know, it's not going to help you. So try to feel that part of your brain, because it really is brain chemistry that we're talking about here, and try to say, I want to try to begin shifting that. When that core of us says, oh, let's go to anger, it'll feel so good to yell back at that person. Just try to feel, what would it feel if Yudhishthira, calmness in psychological battle, how does it feel not to react, to remain calm, and try to be your own analyst. It's the best way, because you know yourself better than anybody else, and really try to work on developing that calmness and psychological battle that's associated with the throat chakra. If you have trouble with anger, join the choir. Because you're projecting from all the chakras, but primarily the throat chakra. So that's a good practical thing to do. And I hope we don't get a huge choir. Right.
I hope we do. Two more very practical things. One, use pranayama. When you're triggered, do 3 hong saws. And do them deeply, because we know that the breath is part of that control of the reactive process. And secondly, try to neutralize the trigger with the opposite polarity of a positive thing. This is especially important where you have repetitive triggers, where every time something happens, you react in a certain way. Catch it right away and do a short affirmation that counteracts that reaction. And you'll find that it's amazingly effective. It will kind of stop those obsessive patterns quite quickly.
Sambhava has been waiting. And then this lady in the middle row, Michael, you can go. Oh, Catherine's already going. Okay, the lady with the white hair. Sambhava goes next, though.
How can we develop greater love for God and greater devotion?
Chanting is one way. Reading whispers and getting really into, Master is very, very devotional. And so read a whispers, find one that's devotional, read it, get into the whisper behind the words it expresses, then learn those words and keep repeating them. In meditation, look at a picture of Master, then close your eyes and visualize his eyes because they're filled with devotion. Develop the habit, both morning and evening, of giving everything, including specifically giving your love to Master, but offering all your possessions and all of who you are. These are just a few ways. There are dozens of ways, but anything that will awaken the love of the heart, and devotion is the love of the heart directed toward God or one of his aspects or entities. So anything that awakens the heart and directs that toward either God or Guru or love in an upward direction will help develop devotion.
But remember, Jyotish just said, devotion is the love of the heart directed towards God. And sometimes what we forget is, how do we know? How do we even know what love is? And so how can we direct it to God? We have to start with where we are. And it's very important as a devotee to have an open, compassionate heart to others. Find ways, if you're cooking in the market, consciously putting love into the food that you're making. If you're seeing a friend of yours who's having a hard time, go out of your way to be there for them. You know, before I even heard of Ananda, I was living in the Midwest, finishing up college, and I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi. And I didn't have any training whatsoever. And one day I was sitting, I remember it still very vividly to this day. It was many years ago, almost 50 more. And I was sitting in my room, and it was a sunny afternoon. And for some reason, I got into a kind of a dream-like mood or something. And I began thinking how fortunate I had been in my life. I had such a loving mother and a fine father, and my brother was we had a wonderful relationship. And then I began thinking of all the people in my life with whom I had exchanged love, you know, friends and teachers and pets, and I just felt more and more filled. And then I looked at my watch, and like 2 hours had gone by. It was probably one of the best meditations I've ever had, and I didn't even know what meditation was. But it was a meditation on how I understood love. And I think that's how I was reading Autobiography, and I think that's how Master came to me as a Brahmavatar. If you want to know what love is, draw from your own experiences in your life. We've all had some, even if some of our relationships have not been optimal. But so start from where you are, and so what does that feel like? And then try to express it outwardly in everything you do, everyone you relate to, the stranger sitting next to you on the overhead rail, whatever it is. Swami was just, golly, always sharing love with everyone who crossed his path. And you could see that their lives were changed because of that. We could tell you many, many stories of Swami in the hospital, Swami shopping, Swami in a restaurant, but always giving love, always giving love. Once in the hospital, he had had hip surgery, and his room was just filled with flowers, as you can well imagine. And he was laying in bed, and he said, I'm so fortunate. I have so many friends. Look at all the flowers here. There are probably people in the hospital who don't have any flowers. And there were a few of us, 3 or 4 of us with him. And he said, I want you all to take these flowers and go into every room where there aren't any flowers. And you go and you bring the flowers and you talk to that person and spend time with that person. And it was blissful. It was so beautiful. So recognize your own experiences of love. Share in everything you do with everyone that you encounter. And then it becomes familiar. And then you can direct it to God. And you realize, I think it was you I was loving all the time. I just didn't know it.
Okay, next question.
Go back to the question of
Catherine?
reactive process.
Go on.
Is it being too superficial or copping out if when you find yourself repeatedly being stuck in reaction to perhaps the same circumstance, if you just say, okay, I give it to God, and then keep moving?
No, of course, it's not copping out to give it to God. But if he keeps giving it back to you, you might want to work on it.
Okay, Shu has a question.
How to overcome the habit of eating unnecessarily, which affects the kriya or meditation because the stomach is full, and it's kind of like an addiction sometime, I guess. From habit we eat and not.
Okay,
Need to
good
eat.
question. I'm sure everyone struggles with that in some form or another. Is there a next question, by the way? Okay, so we're set up. Okay, couple of things that help. Try to be regular in when you meditate, when you eat, and if you can say, okay, this is my eating time, this is my meditating time, and then be committed to regularity. And good habits won't get you to the goal, but it helps you get there. So just try to create the habit. And when the temptation comes, try to find simple to eat before you're going to meditate, because why do we do that? Because the ego doesn't want to let hold of its grip. So eating is an affirmation of individuality, of I'm separate, this is myself. So when that temptation comes, okay, this is at 6 o'clock, it's time to go meditate. My dinner, it's all made, I'll eat it afterwards. But then we say, oh no, I think I'll have a little snack before I meditate. Try to have either a nice big glass of water or some beverage that you like, or some fruit cut up. You say, okay, I'll take that. So if you can't break the habit, then go around it and have little things that won't really affect your meditation so much.
I'll just add very briefly that when you have an addictive habit, just determine not to give in to that addiction for a certain amount of time, and then it begins to decrease in its power. So in your case, if it's snacking before meditation, just say, I won't snack before meditation for the next week. And just take that on as a goal.
Okay, there's a question over here.
I guess it's a short question, but I have to give some context to it. Religion in the past hasn't been very welcoming of gay people, so my question is, as a gay man, how do I approach God and Guru, given the confusion that there is about religion and spirituality and the unwelcomeness it has generated in the past to gay people?
Good question. Okay, well, the beauty of the spiritual life is more and more you see everyone as a soul. And we're all struggling with our own karma, whatever life preferences or styles may be. And we're all, whether it's addictive behavior or gender preference or over sexuality. I mean, we're all working with things. And we can't pretend like, hey, I'm okay. Until you find God, you're not okay. And just to understand that in a true spiritual sangha, everyone's embraced. How can we say anyone's different from me? Even the person that is angry and hostile to us, how can we say they're different than me? That's me. And I think it's so important now. There are two forces at play. There are many forces at play in the world right now. But there's the forces of divisiveness and separation, and you're from Mexico and we're going to build a wall. And I'm sorry if people don't like us to talk about politics, but truth is truth, And so, and then there's, the gay rights movement, the women's rights movement, they're all coming, it's all like this big foment happening now. And it's so important that as people, all of us who are working with higher consciousness, that we try to say, I embrace everyone. We are one. There are no differences. It says in the Festival of Light, even Christ and Krishna and the greatest sinner, there's no difference. And so to be able to own who you are, we have to. If you're going to find God, you can't come to God as somebody else. God won't let you in. You have to come, here I am, it's me. And he'll say, oh good, you came. And you came just as you are. And if other people don't accept us, really it's their problem. It's their problem. And our job is to transcend the separation. One of my dear friends, Nayaswamis in India, she's a African-American lady, and we've traveled all over the world together. And it's been really eye-opening because I didn't realize what happens. I didn't realize the subtle cues you get as a black person. Being in Nevada City, checking out of a grocery store together, the guy gives her the wrong change. Was it an accident? Maybe it was. But so many, many little things. I've learned so much. And coming from a family of Jews, myself, we haven't had an easy time. But you just say, God, this world does not accept and understand all people at this point in time. But as devotees, we need to understand and accept all people. And to try to transcend any sense of separation. And as devotees, to realize that God made you, God made me, just the way we are. Just the way we are. And he made us in that way so that we can keep marching towards God and work out the complexity of our own karma.
My back is a little stiff, so if you see me sit down, it's not because I'm disinterested in the subject. I'll add only this. If you reject any person, you're wrong. Just that simple. Now, that doesn't mean that there may be some behaviors that you're not in favor of. And in this case, I'm not talking about gay rights, mass killings, for instance. But if you hate the person who does the mass killing, then you're wrong. If you not even hate, if you discriminate and say mass killing is wrong, then that's proper discrimination. But everyone is a soul and everyone is a part of God. And if you reject any one, then you're rejecting God in that form. And so, as Devi said, traveling with someone who is in a group that's easily identified and discriminated against, in this case an African American, traveling with them, you see subtle ways in which people are prejudiced. And so if you find yourself being prejudiced, that is a problem that you have and you need to work on it. Okay, next question.
Could you please explain the difference between spirit and soul, or if they're the same?
Difference between spirit and soul. I would say, you get into languages and it's really difficult. In Sanskrit, there'd probably be 23 different words to differentiate the elements of this. I would say in English, spirit to me means the overall subtle energy and subtle aspect of God. Soul means the individualized spark of God. But, language gets tossed around and muddled up, and, sometimes the language is almost as confused as the person using the language.
Okay. Okay, now, then we'll do a few more reading ones.
So, a question about meditation, and in the laboratory of this path of both being esoteric and maybe mystical, yet last year I remember you said, Master said, this path is a practical path, in that the astral world and causal worlds are really who we are in essence. And can you tell me, or help me with the breathlessness and the heartbeat? It feels like the breath is slowing down, but the heartbeat is right there chattering and demanding the breath again. Can you talk about that?
Well, Master says that our path, again, it's one of his mission statements was to disseminate practical scientific techniques for God realization. So that's what to address that part of it. But, the breathless state, again, you get to the point where you have to transcend techniques. And techniques will get you so far, but then and the techniques will help you to refine your consciousness. But you can't go into the breathless state as long as there is awareness, as long as the consciousness is still tied to the post of the ego. And I've known a number of people who said, I started to go into the breathless state, and then I said, oh, I'm not breathing. And then they start breathing again. So as long as I'm not breathing, as long as you're thinking that, you can't do it. You can't get there from here. And so it's deeper and deeper relaxation, deeper and deeper expansion of consciousness. And rather than we're very goal-oriented in the West, rather than thinking, okay, my breathing's getting shallower, now I have to get to breathlessness. Just enjoy the shallowness. And Swami emphasizes in teaching even Hong Sa, enjoy the pauses between the breath. And so use that as a progression where the breath gets shallower, then you enjoy the pauses between the breath. And then the pauses between the breath get longer than the breath itself. And then gradually the sense of self, which is tied to the ego, begins to loosen. And then you just can easily move into that state.
And I'll just add that don't worry about going breathless. It'll keep you from going breathless. Just focus on, for instance, after meditation, trying to see the light and project yourself through that light. So the focus is on absorption and expansion into the light, and forget about the breath. It'll drop off of its own accord, and the heart rate will follow that.
Now, why don't we end with this question, because you can answer it, and I'll answer it, because it kind of addresses everybody. This is a universal question, though it was written by one person.
What can a person do either during Inner Renewal Week or a pilgrimage or a retreat or afterwards to avoid that feeling of thudding? You read it.
I wrote it, okay.
You wrote it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. What can I didn't create the question, but it was handed in. What can a person do either during a renewal week or a pilgrimage or a retreat or afterwards to avoid that feeling of thudding to the ground after soaring in spirit? So that's a good way to end the questions. You could start.
Yeah, I'm thinking. The great line with Jack Benny, who was, had the image of being a terrible miser. So a robber comes up to him and he says, "Your money or your life?" And there's this pause, and Jack Benny says, I'm thinking. Anyway, I'm thinking about thudding to the ground. It's a very common experience after you've been at a high level. Let's say you have a certain specific gravity of consciousness, And during Inner Renewal Week or a pilgrimage or a really good meditation, you're higher than that specific gravity. And then there's the descent back down to it. And it's a very common experience. I think one is to accept the fact that that can happen, but try to keep every elevated experience moving that specific gravity up a little bit higher. So don't expect necessarily in 2 weeks to feel as elevated as you feel right now at the end of Inner Renewal Week. But try in 2 weeks to feel more elevated than you did 6 months ago. And so sometimes realistic expectations are possible. Then what to do to prevent it? Right now you feel probably quite inspired. Try to get 2 or 3 things from here that you build into your life that keep your energy more uplifted. There's another question that asks basically, I'm having trouble with sadhana, and what can I do to elevate my consciousness before I die? I don't know if it's written by somebody who's a little bit more elderly or what, but if you're having trouble with sadhana, if you're wanting to keep your inspiration high, why not make a couple of little changes, like don't listen to downward pulling music anymore. Listen only to upward lifting music, or even better, listen to Master's voice or Swami's lectures. There are thousands of them, and all that takes is the decision of what playlist you're going to work with. And that one decision, if you carry it out, will keep your consciousness elevated and will raise your specific gravity. So I won't go on more than to say, think of 2 or 3 things that will keep your consciousness elevated and put those things into action when you go back.
I'd add just a few things as well. I've noticed at the end, we've been a part of a number of pilgrimages, and I notice at the end, everybody gets real excited. And, I'll write you and you write me and it's just so much fun, and let's never hear, I'll send you this on Facebook and blah, blah, blah. And it makes it outward. And so when you leave here, and it's not to say that we all go and, never say goodbye to each other and thank each other, greet each other, all of that, but try not to let it be too outward. Try to internalize the experience and don't let it be expressed just in emotional outward ways. That really helps you to hold on to it. So just, maybe during the meditation, as many of you will stay, that will be coming up shortly, really try to feel, what did I gain during these days that we've shared together? And ask God, how can I hold on to it? But it won't, unless you're conscious about it, it will dissipate. And you think, well, what happened there? I was really inspired and now I can't even remember. And another practice that sometimes we encourage people is when you have the time, as soon as possible, write yourself a letter and give it to a friend and ask them to mail it to you in 2 months, and talk about the inspiration and the insights that you had during this week, and then ask your friend to mail it to you, and then you read it and you think, really? I wrote that letter? But it's a good way. We just have to keep coming back, keep reminding ourselves of what it is that we've experienced. Keep it internal. Don't, when you go back, those of you who are leaving, to friends and family, you don't need to talk about it all that much, what happened. Just, oh yes, it was wonderful. We had a nice time. But it's precious, and keep it within. The more we can keep that just fire of inner yearning for God burning, then the bigger and stronger it grows. until that fire of yearning for God really burns up everything that's standing in our way. So remember, remind yourself, internalize, and keep trying.
If you want to write a letter, write it and leave it at the front desk when you check out, and they'll send it to you in 2 months.